So I've called my talk "Called to Grow" with a big crossing out of "Called to Grow" because it seems especially unfair of anyone to ask anyone to grow pretty much anything, perhaps apart from sunflowers at the moment. So do we want to grow churches and have healthy, thriving churches? Of course, that still remains the ambition, but right now, to demand churches to produce a plan on how to grow with specific targets is not a realistic ask. And I want to reassure everyone that while there might be an element of that remains a long-term hope, it's certainly not going to be demanded of anyone now. So it's time to rethink, and the verses from Ecclesiastes, "For everything there is a season," came to my mind. We're in a time of ill health as a church and as a nation, and some of us personally as well. So all of that's having an impact on our churches. But I want to reassure everyone as well that even though everything, just as it is in your local churches, and what Call to Grow looks like for me compared with where I started a year ago, is everything has changed. I'm still working hard to enable churches. I'm thinking quite strategically at the moment, but I'm still here to walk alongside any of you and any of your needs. And please get in touch with me if you have any questions or any need for support, and I'll do what I can. So Call to Grow is in a time of transition. I'm hoping that we'll have something, at least a foundation of whatever Call to Grow 2.0 is going to be, ready to at least test in the new year, but that's still quite a stretchful aim. So we've been having conversations, John will know, who's part of one of them last night, about what we should call to grow if we don't want to sound demanding of churches, but to set a tone that allows for growth in the future. The first three ideas that got bandied around were call to renew, call to refresh, call to reset. And I attended the Bromley chapter meeting, and while there were one or two folks there that liked each of those, there was no real support for those ideas. The words that came out of Bromley chapter meeting and suggestions were call to faithfulness, and the word connect came up a lot, call to connect. And the word flourish, and also back to call to recover. But while everyone wants to recover, I hope that the legacy of whatever Call to Grow 2.0 is will last longer than the next 2 years, and will be taking us outside the time of this crisis by quite some way. So what are we called to be? I'm going to leave that as a question to you guys for discussion later. Alongside rethinking a name, because that's just branding at the end of the day, we've been rethinking how and reimagining how the whole process of Call to Grow 2.0 might work. The first thing that struck me actually was that the handbook that had been produced before was difficult to even make a small change to without having to recall it and reissue a new pack every time we wanted to do that. So I think the first thing that's almost certainly going to happen is that we move away from a printed pack. So where will it go? It will go on the Call to Grow, or whatever we rename it to be, page on the website. And to talk a bit more about how Call Together and the Call to Grow strategy might work, and I stress the word might, it's just a proposal, nothing has been decided at all yet. Bishop Simon has been doing some thinking and consultation inside the diocese and outside, and has had very warm responses to the notion of moving away from grow, enrich, resource, towards recovering our churches and moving into reimagining our churches and extending the reach of our churches as steps. And I think what Call to Grow will do is offer resources and support that will allow churches to move, to recover and then move out of that. Churches are all facing very rapid change at the moment, and churches are handling it very differently depending on their starting place. Some churches, for example, are very technically able. Others have difficulty just getting a Wi-Fi signal. Some churches have a younger and larger congregation and are able to find capacity for all sorts of types of ministry. Other churches have got aging congregations who are very understandably wanting to shield right now, and perhaps are less technically able as well. Also, with the way the government's handling things, of course, there's lots of erratic external influences. I think the closure of churches at the moment came as perhaps not a surprise, but it was quite a last-minute sense of when that timing was going to be. So I think there's a realization that even in supporting churches through the recovery stage, things may naturally and have to take steps backward from time to time without any shame against any church at all. And then they will hopefully be able to move forwards again. So we've been talking about, instead of asking churches to plan a 3 to 5 year mission plan, still having that 3 to 5 years perhaps in mind in the end, but working in a more iterative way, starting by thinking about what is achievable now, and then continuously asking that again. And that may be different and change over time, whether through a period of growth or whether through needing to take a step back through national restrictions, etc. There's a lot of sense out there that we need to take encouragement and inspiration and draw strength from each other right now. I'm very interested in both topics for identifying some stories and learning that we can share with each other, and also keen to hear if there's any sense of flourishing going on in your churches right now that's worth discussion and celebration. I would hope that alongside some of those stories, that there would also be resources there to help discern ways of being more resilient, adaptable, and sustainable. And open to hearing as well your ideas for what those resources should be, because at the end of the day, it needs to meet the needs of churches and not what I imagine your needs are. So the programme itself needs to become more resilient. And we were discussing last night at the Archdeaconry steering group how those resources could be provided instead of in one static pack in a variety of media. People are not necessarily willing or able or have time to read tomes now. We can do an awful lot of learning with a visual aid or a 30-second or a short video. So I've already hinted at a couple of my questions already, but I'd like to know from you what's flourishing right now and what are the lessons you'd like to share. If with hindsight, could you do something differently now? How are we called together as a deanery? Are there any great examples of complementary ministry already happening that's showing great collaborations across parish boundaries? What resources might help you discern your church's path to recovery and growth? And how can we be more community responsive? The kind of stories that I've been picking up on they have tended to be about how worship has changed and the life of congregations. There are fewer, not none, but fewer stories of how churches have responded to the needs of their community, and I imagine that has a lot to do with the recovery process itself, and as churches begin to recover, they will be able to start asking that question. And my final question is, how can I best walk alongside you through this time of huge change? What can I do to help you? Those are my questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Abi.